Right now, the day's biggest news stories from a Vegas perspective. This is the Vegas Take with Sharp and Shapiro.
All right, welcome back. It is the Vegas Take, rolling out hour number 2 on the Monday. So glad you could join us. Chris Wynn also guest hosting today in studio. And man, do we have a lot to get to in regards to this impeachment inquiry. We'll get to all of it. What better person to have on the line with us than our In the Ring segment with attorney Michael Avenatti. Michael, thanks for joining us. How are you?
Good morning, gents. How's it going?
What's up, Michael?
Going
Solid.
good. Michael, I heard a rumor that you were going to be in studio this week. Is that true?
That is true. I'm going to be there bright and early with you guys on Wednesday.
Awesome, man. All right, well, we look forward to it. Also, a reminder, all the listeners, we are streaming live on YouTube on our Vegas Take page. All right, Michael, glad you're going to be here Wednesday, but let's get down to business here. Let's start with Kellyanne Conway. I don't know if you heard about some of the statements that she made on a few of the shows over the weekend, but, you know, Chris Wallace, who I respect, and I know you do as well on Fox News, made some statements. Why is it okay for Republicans to do it in regards to closed-door meetings with Benghazi, differing from, you know, the impeachment process? He's making this a similar case to that, and I agree. So here's Fox anchor Chris Wallace questioning the White House counselor Kellyanne Conway's objection to impeachment testimonies being conducted in private.
Respectfully, Chris, this is about impeaching a president of the United States, which is an
Benghazi was about 4 Americans who died.
Because of the negligence of a woman who got defeated for being president of the United States.
Wouldn't you say that's pretty important, too?
And an ambassador,
wait. Wouldn't you say that's pretty important?
lied about a videotape being the reason.
Wouldn't you say Benghazi was pretty important?
I would say Benghazi was extremely important, and I will always be very sad.
But it was conducted behind closed doors, is my point. So why is it okay for Republicans to do it,
the President
but
of the
not
United States
Democrats?
has no due process right. He's had no due process rights afforded to him in this whole process. This is not the way that our rule of law, our system of justice should work for the president or for anyone else.
All right, Michael, what is your response to that?
Well, I mean, two things. Things have gotten so bad for the president that even Kellyanne Conway is having a difficult time defending him. And that's a very bad day for the president. But look, Kellyanne Conway and Trump and others that are making this ridiculous argument that Trump has not had due process, they don't understand generally how the criminal justice system works. You know, normally a grand jury is convened behind closed doors, and the only individuals that have access to that grand jury or can present information or even learn about what happens before the grand jury are the prosecutors, are one side. And in this case, in fact, that's not what has happened. What has happened is that, yes, many of these meetings have been, quote, behind closed doors, close quote, but many of the Republicans have access to the witnesses, have access to the information. They're participating in the proceedings, and this is the first step, or the first few steps, I should say, in a very lengthy process. Donald Trump, if charges are issued from the House, will have his day. He will have the opportunity to cross-examine witnesses, or his counsel will, and present evidence. That day is coming. But he's been afforded far more due process, frankly, at this stage of the proceedings than most individuals are in the criminal justice system day in and day out in America. So I find this entire argument absurd. I understand why they're making it. I understand that it fits their efforts to distract away from what really happened here. But I just find it completely baseless.
Why is it, Michael, that you think that so many of these Republicans that you mentioned are not taking advantage of the fact that they could be a part of these hearings?
Well, many of them have been a part of the hearings, and if they wanted to, they could participate. You know, I think it's a convenient argument for them to make. This is all about distraction at this point, gentlemen. I mean, this is why Donald Trump and the Republicans so desperately want the name of the whistleblower outed. You know, the name and identity of the whistleblower at this point makes absolutely no sense. You know, I made this point over the weekend. This is like blaming the neighbor who called the police at 3:30 in the morning
right.
while the burglary or rape was going on,
right?
And want to focus on the identity of the neighbor. Who cares about the identity of the whistleblower? We're beyond that at this point. Everything that the whistleblower stated in his or her complaint has now been proven to be true by the testimony of other witnesses. This effort to out the identity of the whistleblower is nothing more than an effort to put a face and a name to this scandal so that Trump and the Republicans can do to the whistleblower what they'd like to, or what they want to do to me and what they have done to me and anyone else that's gone after this president. They demonize them. They create fictions around them. They create bogus nicknames for them. They attack them. They dig into their background. They create bogus charges against them. That's their modus operandi, and that's exactly what they want to do with this whistleblower.
We're also going to take your phone calls. Joining us on the line is attorney Michael Avenatti. If you have a question or comment for Michael, give us a buzz. Right now is the time to do it. 702-257-5396. Again, 257-5396 is the number to call. Michael, I also want to play some audio from you where Chris Wallace was questioning Kellyanne Conway on releasing of the aid or lack thereof to the Ukraine. I want you to hear this, and then we'll comment on it.
Kellyanne, the president didn't release the aid until the story was out.
You're trying to make that causation where it may be
I find it an awfully interesting coincidence.
They've got their aid, and that's what's important. And why
No. But how the aid came out, it was held up all summer till the 11th of September, and the only reason it came out was because...
No, don't say that. Don't go there.
It had already...
You have no idea that's why it was held up.
So you think it's a coincidence that the whistleblower complaint comes on the 9th and the aid is released on the 11th? You're suggesting that's a coincidence?
Well, I'm suggesting that you don't know what you were just about to say to be true. That the only reason it came out was because 2 days before a whistleblower that Schiff's staff was nefariously colluding with. Adam Schiff was colluding with the whistleblower, apparently.
All right.
Michael, your response to that?
Well, actually, Wallace then follows up after that and asks again, do you know it's not true? And she says, I don't know, which I found that to be absolutely shocking. So she did not deny that, in fact, the aid was withheld until after the story broke. At the end of the day, when pressed, she said that she didn't know, which I found remarkable when Kellyanne Conway does not feel comfortable enough hanging it out there in the defense of the president. Look, I don't think there's any question at this point that the aid was held up and would have continued to be held up until an investigation into Hunter Biden was announced. I don't think it's a coincidence that the story breaks on the 9th of September, and all of a sudden someone in the White House, Trump and others, decide, you know what, we better release this aid because it's not going to look good if we have continued to hold up this aid in light of this scandal breaking. I'm sure that's what happened.
Yeah, Michael, isn't this just a classic case of the timeline doesn't add up to what Kellyanne Conway or anybody in the Trump administration that's trying to defend how this all went down?
Well, I think that's true. But look, whether the aid was released or not, and the timing of when the aid was released in relation to when the story broke, whether there was a quid pro quo or not, all of this is window dressing in my view, because I'm going to go back to what I've said since this scandal first surfaced and since the alleged transcript, which is not a transcript, which is another point that I've been making, was released. The bottom line is this. The President of the United States cannot enlist the assistance of a foreign nation or leader to assist him individually, personally, in a political campaign. That is enough. It is an abuse of office. It is an impeachable offense, period.
Michael, I want to talk to you a little bit about Donald Trump's taxes or lack thereof because we haven't really seen them yet, okay? I wanted to ask you a little bit about this because Donald Trump in New York in his tax case has lost another appeal and now must hand over his returns, and he's filed an appeal after losing the initial case at the district court level. So as an attorney, can you give us a little bit of information on this? When are we actually going to see his tax returns? Because I think this is a big deal.
So the Manhattan District Attorney has launched an investigation into the Trump organization's finances, and namely how these the hush money payments were handled, including $130,000 that was paid to my former client, Stormy Daniels. And so they issued a subpoena to the accountants, I believe, and to the Trump organization for various tax returns. Trump in turn filed a lawsuit in federal court to prevent the turnover of those tax returns. The federal district judge agreed with the Manhattan District Attorney and ordered Trump to produce the returns, or Trump's organization to produce the returns. It then went to the Second Circuit Court of Appeals, who issued a decision today basically shooting down the arguments of Donald Trump and his lawyers and finding that, in fact, the Manhattan District Attorney had the right to subpoena this information. Now the indication is that Trump's lawyers are going to take this to the U.S. Supreme Court. My guess is the court will agree to accept review of the case, hopefully on an expedited basis, because if not, it's going to be many, many months, well into next year, before we reach a decision in the case, or a decision is reached in the case, I should say. But this is the closest I think that anyone has come in the last 3 to 4 years to actually seeing these tax returns and getting to the bottom of what Trump and his organization have claimed in the past.
Michael, I know these are hypotheticals and speculation, and I know you're not huge on those two things, but you're a smart guy. What is it that you think, and again, we're speculating here, what is it that you think Donald Trump does not want you or I to see in his tax returns, if you had to guess?
So I've had cases in the past where people were celebrities or very wealthy defendants, or at least so they said, and they traded on that belief, that public persona, in order to perpetuate their fame and the money that they were earning. And when we really dug into it, we found that it was all a facade, that it was not, in fact, real. And we utilized that information, frankly, to settle cases in the past very successfully, because what we made it clear was, in a settlement context, in a settlement conference or mediation, look, if we go to trial in this case, I don't know if we're going to win or lose, but over the course of that trial, the world is going to come to know that you, Jane Doe celebrity, don't really have any money. You're not what you have pretended to be, and that's going to destroy this entire persona that you have. And I think that's exactly what this tax return issue is all about. And I think it's why he's never disclosed his tax returns. I think that's why he fights like hell to avoid them being disclosed. Has he earned money over the course of his lifetime? Has he been successful in business? Sure. I'm willing to give him that. Has he been anywhere close to as successful as he likes to think and likes to claim? Hell no. I don't believe that at all. And I also think that those tax returns would show that he hasn't paid tax in many, many years, and he's claimed huge losses associated with his businesses. And he knows that this would undercut his persona with millions of people in America if all of a sudden they figured out that, in fact, this guy is not nearly as successful as he's claimed to be. I think that's what's at issue here.
Do you think that he has any major loans with Russian banks that Vladimir Putin could have a personal interest in, that he has not paid out or that are outstanding currently?
I mean, do I think that's possible? Sure. Do I have any evidence of that? No. I don't know whether that's accurate or not. I think that if he has any loans from any financial institution in Russia, the likelihood of Vladimir Putin or the Russian government having significant influence over those entities would be very, very high, because that's the nature of their financial system to a significant degree, and the way that Vladimir Putin runs Russia. But that's another possibility. But I think it may be that, but I think it's the first issue that I raised. I just think that he doesn't want to be exposed. He doesn't want all of his lies relating to his business and financial success to be exposed. This is a guy that is very, very focused on appearances, and he's always been focused on appearances. I mean, if you saw this story over the weekend that he needs reading glasses, but he doesn't want to be photographed and is afraid to put on the reading glasses in front of people, doesn't want other people to see him in reading glasses. Think about this. This is a guy that is very vain. He is very concerned about appearances at all times. And this tax return issue, if it would show that he is not as successful as he's claimed, it would really strike at the heart of his entire persona that he has perpetuated.
Michael Avenatti joining us live on the line. If you have a question or comment, give us a buzz, 257-5396. Again, that number is 702-257-5396. Why don't we try to squeeze in a few calls before we go to break? And why don't we start off with Mason? Mason, thanks for calling into the Vegas Take. You are on with Michael Avenatti. Go ahead. Mason, go ahead. Mason, are you there? Okay, we lost Mason. 257-5396. Let's go to L. L, you are next on the Vegas Take. What's on your mind?
Good morning, Michael. Good morning, guys. I wanted to make 2 quick points about this. Now, you've got the Republicans. They're whining about the process and no due process. You have Mark Meadows and one other gentleman that's going in and listening in on all of this stuff and then going to the White House and strategizing with how they're going to deal with what evidence he's hearing. That's totally off base, and he's doing that. And then you've got Lindsey Graham, a senator who's going to sit in judgment of this. He's come out already and said no matter what he hears, no matter what evidence, he doesn't think it has anything. He will never. It's dead on arrival. How could he possibly say I'm not getting due process when they're all attorneys for him and working to help? What do you think of that?
That's a good question, Michael. Go ahead and respond to that.
Well, like I said earlier, I think this entire argument that he's not getting due process is absolutely bogus. I mean, the trial has not even started. Charges have not even been issued yet. And despite that fact, many of his supporters in Congress have significant access to witnesses and to evidence and to information. I mean, just today, certain witnesses are not appearing to testify in front of Congress, and they're not appearing to testify at the request of Donald Trump and the White House. I mean, this would be in a criminal, this would never happen in a standard criminal case where you would actually have the target of the investigation telling a witness not to testify in front of a grand jury. That very well would constitute obstruction of justice and lead to additional federal criminal charges, at least, and state charges if you were at the state level. Mm-hmm. So this entire argument that he's not getting due process, again, it's designed to distract away from the facts and the evidence that have been presented thus far. And look, if charges are issued, there's going to be a trial, and he's going to have full access to everything associated with that.
Mm-hmm. Number to call, 257-5396, 702-257-5396. Let's go to Joel. Joel, you have a question about subpoena legality with Michael. Go ahead.
Yes. Hi, Michael. JD had touched upon this earlier. Is it a crime for these people who are not complying with the legally issued subpoena, or is it not a crime?
Michael, go ahead.
Well, that is not an easy question to answer, frankly, but at a minimum, it constitutes contempt, and individuals could be jailed pending compliance with the actual subpoenas. And I think, frankly, that Adam Schiff and the Democrats have not been aggressive enough as it relates to enforcing these subpoenas. Every time one of these individuals doesn't comply with one of these subpoenas, Adam Schiff takes to the podium and he has a press conference and he talks about how terrible it is. Well, okay, that's all well and good, but that's not going to get anybody's attention. I think that they really need to start taking this to the next level and personally figuring out a way to hold people overnight if necessary or over many nights until they comply with the congressional subpoena process. I mean, this whole idea that you can just ignore these congressional subpoenas and do whatever the hell you want just because Donald Trump tells you to do so is a fallacy. The process doesn't work that way.
Number to call if you have a question or comment for Michael Avenatti. The number is 257-5396, 702-257-5396. Anna, you are next on with Michael. Go ahead.
What's up, Anna?
Hi, Michael. How you doing?
Hi, Anna.
Okay, I got a question for you, Michael. Do you think you still have what it takes to jump in this race at any moment, no matter what you're going through? Do you think you have what it takes to jump in this race at any time?
Go ahead, Michael.
Well, do I think that I would like to jump in the race? Absolutely. Do I think that I have what it takes to take on Donald Trump and to beat him in an election? 100%. And I think that, he and Steve Bannon and many others were very concerned about that because they don't want to match up against a candidate like me. They don't want to match up with somebody that can really trade shots with Donald Trump and take the fight to him. And I think that's what it's going to take to beat him. But with that said, I mean, do I see that happening at this stage? Absolutely not, because I have to deal with a number of, very serious federal charges that have been brought upon me by the Department of Justice that's been weaponized at the request of Donald Trump. These guys did a really good job taking me out of the mix, frankly, as it relates to 2020, to kneecapping me. And I'm looking forward to proceeding through these matters, and we'll see what happens in the future. But I do not envision a scenario at this point, at this stage, with the timing and everything else, of me getting involved, unfortunately. And so I'm hopeful, though, that one of the other candidates is going to be able to defeat this guy, because if one of the candidates is not able to defeat Donald Trump, I don't think you're going to recognize his nation in 5 years after the damage that's done from another 4 years of Donald Trump.
So joining us on the line, it's attorney Michael Avenatti. We will take your calls on the other side of the break, and we will get to those of you that have been waiting on hold. The number to call is 257-5396, 702-257-5396. When we get back, I want to get Michael's take on Beto O'Rourke out of the presidential race. Was that a shock to him? We will ask him about that. We will get more into these four that were supposed to be witnesses into this impeachment inquiry not showing up today. We'll ask him a little bit more about that. And again, as I said, take your calls. What does he think about the president and Biff, also known as Don Jr., being booed at this UFC event over the weekend? That and much more with Michael Avenatti coming up next. You're listening to The Vegas Take. All right, welcome back. It is The Vegas Take. Sharp and Shapiro, our guest on the line, of course, attorney Michael Avenatti, who, by the way, will be joining us in the studio on Wednesday. Good timing for that, because we are streaming live every show as we speak right now. You can see our ugly mugs on YouTube, which is the Vegas Take page. Michael, I want to read one of your tweets, which I literally choked laughing when I read it over the weekend yesterday. I want to read this tweet. It says, "Thank God we don't have a president that blatantly lies all the time in a direct and purposeful effort to deceive tens of millions of Americans and avoid being held accountable for his actions, because that would be extremely dangerous to the future of our republic." I'm just going to go out on a limb and say you were being just a little bit facetious and sarcastic.
Yeah, just a little bit. I mean, the lying and deception has gotten significantly worse over the last 6 months than it's ever been. I mean, there's no reliance on the truth whatsoever. I mean, this guy will literally say anything. He will say the red is or the light is red when the light is green, if it means that it's going to help him politically. I mean, it's really astounding. Yeah. And when he does it, there's tens of millions of people that actually believe it. And that's a frightening fact at this point.
Or he'll say my skin is white when it's actually orange. I think we all could agree on that. 257-5396 is the number to call if you have a question or comment for Michael Avenatti. Why don't we go to Sharon? Sharon, you're next with Michael. Go ahead.
Hi. How is everybody?
Good, Sharon. What do you got for Michael?
Well, I'm wondering if Bernie Sanders is very persistent and he keeps hanging in there. And I'm wondering if you think if he does not get the nomination, if he would break off, become an independent, and be a spoiler like Ralph Nader. Do you think there's any chance of that?
Good question, Sharon. Go ahead, Michael.
I don't think that there's a chance of that, because I think that Bernie Sanders loves America and is very concerned about what that would result in. Namely, he knows that if were he to do that it would very likely lead to the reelection of Donald Trump. And I think that he cares about this country and cares about the future of the country too much to do that. So I do not think it's likely that he's going to do that. I did want to bring up, and I've spent a lot of time on this show talking about the key electoral states. And there's a poll that came out today in the New York Times, a very extensive poll. And if you look at their methodology, they were really smart about the way they went about this. And they polled voters in 6 states. Now, Ohio is not included, but Arizona and North Carolina, of course, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Michigan are included. And they polled 3,000 people across those states. And they have a chart within that poll that shows how each of the 3 front runners for the Democrats fare against Donald Trump. And folks, this race is a lot closer than what a lot of people are leading you to believe. The national polls mean nothing. It doesn't matter what's going on at a national level. It comes down to these states. And when you look at these states, Joe Biden is the only Democrat who is leading almost across the board in 5 of the 6 states. Warren has significant problems against Trump in these states, as does Bernie Sanders. And this needs to be a wake-up call to the Democrats. If the Democrats nominate somebody that is too far to the left and too progressive, they are going to lose this election in the Electoral College to Donald Trump, and people are going to wake up the day after Election Day in an absolute state of shock that'll make 2016 look like a warm-up lap.
And so I asked this question to Brian last week in kind of a more or less private conversation. But I said, I don't understand why Trump even tried to go after Joe Biden and Hunter Biden. I didn't think that he actually needed to go after Hunter Biden. I don't think he needed to get dirt on Joe Biden, with the whole Ukrainian scandal, to win the election in 2020. I thought that he kind of had it in the bag. But you think I'm incorrect in that statement?
Well, I do. I think that he has significant problems running against Joe Biden, and I think that they've known that for a significant period of time, that Biden was a substantial, one of the, if not the most substantial threat to Donald Trump in 2020. And, Nixon didn't need to break into the headquarters either. I mean, he had that election in the bag. None of that was necessary. And he was not nearly in as precarious of a situation as Donald Trump is as it relates to 2020. So, look, and I tweeted this out. I think at this point, the Democrats, my party has a 50-50 shot of screwing this thing up. They're notorious for screwing up national elections and throwing them away. And look, I think they got a 50-50 shot of screwing this up. And if they nominate somebody other than Joe Biden, they're going to do great in California and New York and some of these other liberal hotbeds, but they're going to lose a number of the states that they have to win in order to win the election. And if they nominate someone like Elizabeth Warren, for instance, who I like quite a bit, don't get me wrong, or Bernie Sanders, same thing relating to Bernie Sanders. But it's not about nominating the person that would make the best president, not for this election. It's about nominating the person that has the best shot of beating Donald Trump. And I could envision a scenario where Warren or Sanders could win the popular vote by 6 or 6.5 million people and still lose the election due to the Electoral College.
Michael, let me play devil's advocate a little bit here. Do you think there is a possibility, though, that regardless of whoever the Democratic nominee would be, whether it was Biden, Sanders, or Warren, that we are in a position in this country right now where even no matter what the ideology is of Bernie Sanders, who is a Democratic socialist, or Elizabeth Warren, who wants, would be considered, very drastic measures as far as Medicare for all, things like that, that person, if they are the Democratic nominee, always get pulled to the center, don't they? It seems to me that in our country, it always ends up being the case where, whether it would be one of those three candidates, that they would somehow be pulled towards the center.
I think that's true sometimes, but the problem is that the die has been cast. Bernie Sanders cannot change the narrative around his existence and what he's all about overnight. Because he's so entrenched as being who he is, which, again, I don't think is a bad thing. I'm just talking about what it's going to take to win an election.
Right.
The same thing as it relates to Elizabeth Warren. Sometimes you're so far left or you're so far right that no matter what you do, no matter how you try to change your messaging, you're not going to be able to get back into the center. And then, of course, we have some Democrats that argue that, no, the Democrats need to nominate somebody that has a bold vision, that has a new progressive agenda to get people excited, so you'll boost turnout in these states. And I understand that argument, but, I've been hearing, for instance, that the youth vote was going to turn out for 30 years. Every 4 years I hear the same thing, that, no, this is going to be the election where the young people are going to actually turn out and they're going to vote in the presidential election. And you know what? It never happens. Now, maybe it's going to happen this time around because the future is so dark if Donald Trump is reelected. I hope they do turn out, but I've been hearing the same argument for the better part of 30 years. And the other thing that argument does not take into account is it doesn't take into account the flip side.
Right.
Perhaps there's going to be more Republicans or more moderates that will turn out to vote against a Bernie Sanders or an Elizabeth Warren than they otherwise would turn out to vote against, let's say, Joe Biden. I think the Democrats really need to come to grips with what this polling data looks like in the key states. And they need to understand that while they may want a revolution, while they may want a progressive, this is not the election to put forward that candidate.
Joining us on the line, attorney Michael Avenatti. I promised I would get back to the phone lines. We got a lot of people waiting patiently on hold. Let's start off with Matt. Matt, you're on with Michael Avenatti. Go ahead.
What's up, fellas?
Hi.
Hey, point I wanted to make is around the whole narrative that, this is about the phone call. And, isn't it a conspiracy, with the whole thing with Giuliani and all of the shadow, foreign policy that was happening? Isn't there some, ability to make it a broader crime than simply, make it about the phone call and the whistleblower and, and then on top of that, what about obstruction of justice and contempt of Congress for ignoring the subpoenas?
Good question, Matt. Michael, what do you say to that?
So we touched on the subpoenas earlier, but your point relating to could there be additional criminal charges that could be brought against Giuliani or others, I agree, of course. The belief is that the president cannot be indicted while in office. I don't agree with that belief. It's never been tested in the courts. It may be touched on, actually, by the Supreme Court if they take review of this case that just came out of the Second Circuit that we were talking about. But people like Rudy Giuliani and others that are not an elected president could very well face potential criminal charges, conspiracy, fraud, money laundering, and the like relating to what is going on here. I think that is a distinct possibility.
Number to call again if you have a question for Michael Avenatti, 257-5396. Again, 702-257-5396.
So Trump is, he has the negative things going on right now. Obviously, the impeachment inquiry, the testimony coming out, the entire transcript taking place. But on the positive side of things, there were 300,000 jobs added to the market last month, 75,000 more than estimated, and the stock market is at an all-time high. Do you think that all of this will overshadow the positive going on right now in America, Michael?
Well, I think the negative has a tendency to overshadow the positive, regardless of the situation. I do think that there's going to be more emphasis paid on the negative. And look, the economy for a lot of people is doing very, very well, and the economy for many additional people is not doing so well. I've seen various polls that show that, anywhere from 50 to 70% of Americans do not believe the economy is helping them more than it was, let's say, 4 years ago, that they're not better off than they were 3 or 4 years ago. I think that's a key statistic. But I'm going to go back to what I said last week. The problem for Trump is the guy doesn't really know how to win. I mean, he talks a lot about winning and how much winning he accomplishes, but he doesn't know how to win. If he would stay off Twitter and keep his mouth shut and stop engaging with the press and stop engaging on so much of this nonsense, he'd be polling a lot better in my view. But he's incapable of doing that. I mean, thankfully, at least from my perspective.
I tend to agree with you. Again, that number to call.
Yeah, us too.
Again, that number to call 257-5396. Let's go to Yvonne. Yvonne, you're next on the Vegas Take. What you got for Michael?
What's up, Yvonne?
How you doing
Ivan,
today,
I'm
Michael?
sorry. Ivan, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Hey, Ivan.
No problem. How you doing today, Michael?
Good. How are you, Ivan?
Good. I was just wondering why you didn't press Trump more on the Stormy Daniels thing. I mean, we as regular Americans, if something like that happened to us, we got to go through it. What makes them special?
All right, Michael, go ahead and respond to that. Thank you, Ivan.
Well, I don't think a lot of people can claim that I wasn't aggressive enough as it relates to the Stormy Daniels litigation.
Yeah.
I was about as aggressive as you could possibly be, and I think that's why that case got so much traction and stayed in the news for as long as it was and proved to be as problematic as it was for the president. So I think in that regard, we did a really good job. We got a couple adverse rulings from the district court judge out of Los Angeles that I obviously to this day disagree with. And that case could have gone far differently had he, for instance, early on ordered a deposition of the president of the United States. Had I had a chance to depose Donald Trump, who knows where we might be as it relates to that case, and who knows where we might be as it relates to impeachment. But of course, that did not happen. The judge did not permit that deposition, and ultimately Donald Trump and Michael Cohen put their tails between their legs, and they went home. They basically agreed that the NDA was null and void, which, frankly, they should have done that immediately when we filed the case. I thought the odds were 50-50 that they were going to do it right after we filed the case. Thankfully for us, they did not, which allowed us a toehold and to really make something out of that. Ultimately, Michael Cohen was convicted on multiple criminal charges, including charges relating to the hush money payment. So, I think we were as aggressive as we possibly could have been. And I think that, but for a couple rulings, who knows where we might be today.
All right, number to call again, 257-5396, joined by Michael Avenatti. Let's go to Elizabeth. Elizabeth, you're next with Michael. Go ahead.
Hi, Michael. I want you to put on your other professional helmet and talk about your tweet this morning about Mr. Penske buying the Speedway.
Okay, Michael, explain to us what that's all about.
Well, I've been a fan of racing and was involved in racing for many, many years. I'm a racing motorsports enthusiast. I have been going to the Indianapolis 500 for a long time, have been to that track on many occasions. It's a remarkable, special place for anybody that's into racing and motorsports. And this morning it was announced that Roger Penske, whose politics I do not agree with, but I have an enormous amount of respect for him and what he's done in the racing and motorsports community, the great success that he's had, and he's built a world-class organization. He is purchasing the Indianapolis Motor Speedway and IndyCar, the series of open-wheel racing here in the United States, and I'm excited about that because I think that's going to be a great development for racing. A lot of people forget that, way back when, open-wheel racing, kart is what it was called at the time, that was the leading race series in America. I mean, it was hands and above even more popular than NASCAR. And they had a bunch of embroiled infighting, which ultimately led to NASCAR kind of taking over the role of racing in America in many ways. But I'm excited for the sport. I'm excited for Indianapolis and the Motor Speedway. And I think it's going to be great for the city, and I think it's going to be great for America.
Michael, I find it fascinating, though, considering, look, your political viewpoint wouldn't necessarily, from a person, on the outside looking in to you, I wouldn't think that, your ideology would line up with a lot of the people that are in the racing world. Like a lot of those people come from backgrounds and have ideas regarding politics that would be absolutely contradictory to your viewpoint. Am I wrong on that, Michael?
No, I think you're right about that. But, I'm a lot more moderate than most people think that I am. People think that because I've been so anti-Trump and I've been so combative with Trump and so aggressive that, I'm incredibly far to the left. And I'm really not. I'm very moderate. I'm left of center. There's no question about that. But I'm not that left of center. And I think people have a misconception about me because I have been so anti-Trump, and I'm going to continue to be anti-Trump. I don't think at the end of the day Trump has done the Republican Party, for instance, any favors, and I think that their undying devotion to him is ultimately going to be a problem. But, I'm excited for Indianapolis and that Motor Speedway. I have a lot of great memories from that race and going to that race, and I think it's going to be great for the sport.
So going back to politics here, what are your thoughts, Michael, on Beto O'Rourke announcing a few days ago that he was leaving the presidential race? Right decision?
There's no question it was the right decision. I wrote an op-ed back in September. I was very critical of Beto O'Rourke's decision to run, that he was not the candidate because he's not a guy that likes to get his uniform dirty. And I also predicted exactly what happened, which is, once he got in a primary field, and once he had to take some shots, that he wasn't going to know how to react. And you saw that in the first debate. I mean, as soon as somebody took the fight to him, this guy was a deer in the headlights. He's not the candidate to run against Donald Trump by any stretch of the imagination. I mean, I thought all along that he would get eaten alive. Strategically, I think he made a number of mistakes. I think that he should have immediately decided upon losing the Senate race, i.e. within weeks, he should have announced his candidacy for the presidency. He went on that fog drive or whatever the hell he discussed it, where he was trying to find himself. I thought that was a little kooky and didn't serve him well. And I think he waited too long to get in the race. I think he should have gotten the race by the first week of December and used a lot of that momentum. And I think he lost that. I think the Vanity Fair piece was a big mistake. Obviously, the quote that he was, quote, born to be in it. I'm sure that he wishes that he had that back. But look, he's not a serious enough of a candidate, frankly, to go up against Donald Trump. The skateboarding in the Whataburger parking lot and all of the other nonsense, that's all fun. It gets a lot of attention on social media, but people don't want a president of the United States that's riding a skateboard through a Whataburger's parking lot.
That's true.
I'm sorry. And that kind of person is not the kind of person that's going to go up against Donald Trump. So I think he made the right decision. And I hope that there's some other Democrats in the race that also agree to get out of the race because they're sucking up resources and dollars that could otherwise be used to defeat Donald Trump.
I agree with you, and I know a lot of other Democrats would agree with you on that as well. What do you make of Donald Trump? You know what happened in the World Series, getting booed by, it appeared, at least half the crowd at the Nationals game. And now the Nationals, at least a few, are saying that they are not going to visit the president at the White House. And then you have Don Jr., Biff, your buddy Biff, along with Kimberly Guilfoyle and the president attending the UFC fight over the weekend. Large amounts of boos there as well. And then the excuse I hear from some people is, well, that was New York. What do you expect? And then in Washington, well, that was Washington. What do you expect? Michael, correct me if I'm wrong. I don't recall Barack Obama ever being booed like that pretty much anywhere in his 8 years as president.
Yeah, I don't know if he was or he wasn't. I don't recall it. It's possible that he was, but not to the same degree. But, you know, look, I'm convinced that it was probably Biff's idea to have his father come to a UFC match, and they thought that would be, you know, his crowd. And I'm 100% convinced that was Don Jr.'s idea. And I don't think it played as well as they were hoping that it would. And I think that's why you saw Biff sending out tweet after tweet after tweet trying to combat this argument that his father had been booed the night before. I mean, I think he sent out 10 tweets about it or some big number. But, you know, I don't think it went over as well as he had hoped. But, look, I mean, if they really want to draw a crowd for a UFC fight, I don't understand why Biff keeps ducking me. I mean, let's have this boxing match. I mean, let's get after it.
Set it up. Let's do it.
Can you imagine the amount of money we could raise for charity and the amount of attention that we could bring to some good causes? I mean, I think that'd be a lot of fun. We need to do it.
Yeah,
listen.
And clearly he's interested in that type of thing.
Yeah,
I mean,
you know,
obviously.
And Don Jr., by the way, correct me if I'm wrong, didn't he wimp out on The View? Wasn't he supposed to attend The View
today
with Kimberly Guilfoyle, and he kind of wussed out on that, Michael?
Yeah, I had not heard that. But, I mean, look, this guy has been, you know, he's been ducking things his entire life, you know, while he's had his silver spoon in his mouth and his gold toilet under his ass. I mean, this guy has accomplished nothing in his life, and he loves to pop off in, echo chambers, loves to go on Hannity and other shows, but he doesn't want to be confronted with anyone that actually will debate him or disagree with him, et cetera. He's a keyboard warrior on Twitter. And that's one of the reasons why he's refused to make any appearance with me publicly and debate any of these issues or any of the things that he likes to accuse me of and others on Twitter.
Well, Michael, we have a golden toilet set for you when you're in studio here Wednesday. We look forward to that. In a few days, Michael will be here in studio, and plenty to talk about with him in a few days, that's for sure. Michael, I always appreciate it when you take some time out of your busy day to join us, and we look forward to seeing you here in Las Vegas Wednesday, my friend. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Michael.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Michael.
See you guys in a couple days.
Yep,
all right. There you go. Attorney Michael Avenatti, and I really do look forward to him coming in studio because he brings it. He certainly brings it when we chat with him on the phone, but when he's in studio, it's a different animal. And you know what? If you are a Republican out there right now and you are a politician and you want to debate Michael Avenatti and you are a conservative or a Republican and you want an opportunity to debate him mano a mano, I want you to email our producer right now. It is producer@thevegastake.com. Again, that email is producer@thevegastake.com. If you're a conservative out there listening, maybe you're a politician, email our producer, pitch our producer, and perhaps we will give you an opportunity to debate Michael face-to-face. I'll tell you, there's a lot of cowards out there, a lot of people on the right that are not willing to do so.
Well, you know, here's the problem. When you attack someone digitally and you won't stick up, you won't add substance to what you're saying and give them a chance to respond to you, that makes you, what? A coward.
All right, well, we'll see if anybody responds to that. We're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we are going to be joined by one of the best pound-for-pound fighters in the world. That is Showtime's Sean Porter. A lot to get to with him. Chris Wynn in studio as well. Take a quick break. Be back right after this. You're listening to The Vegas Take.